Hi, I'm Liv and welcome to the Book Nook. So today I'm going to do a wrap up of all the books that I've read in the last part of June and a haul of the books that I've bought in the last part of June. So I'm basically wrapping up June all together. Then my next video on Wednesday is going to be my books of the year so far, and then after that I will have my first July haul. I have already got a few. I know it's only the 2nd of July now, but I've had 2 days. I can buy a lot of books in 2 days. I haven't bought a lot. Anyway, that'll be coming up. That's a sneak peek. Oh. So the first one I'm going to talk about was one that I read just before I did my back. That is The Impossible Fortress by Jason Rekulak. Now this is a proof copy, so this is not what the cover looks like. If I can figure out how, I'll put what the cover looks like over the top of it. Probably not. Now I know that I have hauled this one a little while ago, and I did really enjoy this one. It felt a bit like The Power that I read recently. It felt like one that was kind of an in-between sort of older YA and general sort of adult fiction. But that's not necessarily a criticism, that's just sort of how it felt when I was reading it. But I really did enjoy this one. It's funny, it's quite sweet, it feels very 80s. Billy and Mary are really good characters, they're sort of really well written. The ending was sort of not what I was expecting. It's not a sort of story that sort of goes quite where you're thinking it's going to go. And the ending is a bit kind of like, oh, okay. And I suppose there were clues along the way, and I was probably just a bit too dense to pick them up. But yeah, all in all, and I'm not going to spoil it, because all in all, it was a really enjoyable book. I think it's one that I actually recommended to a customer the other day to get their sort of late 20s son back into reading, because it's got that, it is quite a male energy about it, as you would probably expect in a tale about 3 teenage boys trying to get a copy of Playboy and obsessing about computer games and writing computer games. So yeah, I would recommend this one, The Impossible Fortress by Jason Rekulak. It's a good solid read, nothing sort of too taxing, but nicely done, good story, good characters. So yeah, I'd recommend that one. I know I've been saying I need a haircut since I started doing booktube, but this is just getting ridiculous now. So the next one I read is one that I read while I was flat on my back, and that is Evening Primrose by Kopano Matlwa. Now Kopano Matlwa is a South African author who has been sort of called and compared to Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie as a sort of South African version of that, which I think is probably a bit simplistic, but having read this one I can sort of see why. And this one was originally published in South Africa as Period Pains, I believe. And it's just being published now in the UK by Scepter Books, who sent me a copy of this a little while ago, and I've only just got around to reading it. But essentially it's a tale of a young woman in South Africa who is a doctor. She's trained to be a doctor, and it's about her work in the sort of hospitals in South Africa and sort of dealing with sort of post-apartheid racial tensions between sort of black South Africans and foreigners, you know, and black people not from South Africa who've moved to South Africa, and sort of dealing with the tensions. And there's another doctor in there who's sort of quite anti-foreigner, even though she is a foreigner, and there's a lot of sort of, yeah, there's a lot of tension in there. And then basically this doctor is assaulted, and it sort of deals with the fallout of that, and it's exploring sort of mental health, women's health. She's has these really bad periods from a young age, hence why it was called Period Pains when originally published. And I found it to be a very moving book and very powerful. It was certainly one that was sort of quite close to the bone in some places, and I sort of found it uncomfortable but in an important way. As I say, the way it sort of weaves in the mental health and sort of makes you question things from before and sort of right from the start of the book is really nicely done. So it's a very powerful book, yet not a particularly chunky book. This one is really good. It's published later this month, 27th of July, this one comes out. And yeah, I'm going to be certainly recommending this to a few people. As I say, really powerful, very intelligent, moving, insightful book. So yeah, if you like Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie, I'd say read this. As I say, I think that kind of comparison can feel maybe a little sort of simplistic, but it's not a comparison that's without merit, I don't think. So yeah, Evening Primrose by Kopano Matlwa. I look forward to reading some more of her writing. I'm hoping that Scepter will be possibly publishing some of her other books in the UK. That would be nice, please. Then the next one I read is a book that I started a little while ago, and that is Grayson Perry's The Descent of Man. Now, when I say I started it, I'd only read a few pages, sort of as I bought it. I was like, oh, I'm going to start this one immediately, and I read a few pages and then put it to one side and started reading other things, so I'd sort of forgotten where I was up to in it, so I went back to the beginning and read this one again while I was flat on my back. So, The Descent of Man by Grayson Perry, I'm sure you will have heard about, and it's essentially a book about what it means to be a man in modern society and the harmful implications of sort of masculinity and a lot of the tropes that men are brought up with, and how... So it's sort of looking at why feminism is important to men and how we can rethink masculinity, maleness. And it does do it in a way that doesn't sort of diminish the point of feminism as being, you know, equality for women and focusing on that side of it. But I think it is quite a tactfully handled way of saying to men, you know, come on, there's problems here too. It's harmful that, you know, you're not allowed to cry and all of this. And there are harmful aspects of masculinity to men, not just to women. And it talks about, you know, the default white man, the default man, and how that has an implication on everything sort of trickling down through society, and how it's seen as the default and every other position of thought, of creativity, anything like that is other, and how, again, that is harmful to the default man as well. And there's this expectation on all men to perform in a certain way in life, in their jobs, in society in general, that is very harmful. So yeah, I'd had a lot of talk about this one when it came out in hardback. But one thing, when it came out in hardback, it was like huge. It was like yay big, and it was really, so I never actually had a copy of the hardback. I waited until the paperback. So how have they done a tiny little slim thing from that bigger hardback? I'm confused. So yeah, I definitely recommend this one. This is the kind of book that actually I've read a few in the last 18 months. I personally would think this book and Sarah Pascoe's Animal, I think they should be required reading, or, you know, not required reading because that kind of, they should be very much encouraged reading for teenagers, and maybe parents as well would probably be quite helpful. So yeah, go read this one, I think. I am so coherent, I am so tired. Then the next book I read is one that I've been meaning to read for a little while, and I finally got around to reading because it is Waterstone's Fiction Book of the Month this month, July, for the month of July. So I thought I'd finally get around to reading, and that is Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad. Essentially about a young girl growing up on a slave plantation and is invited to escape on the Underground Railroad, which Colson Whitehead has made into a physical Underground Railroad. It reminded me of something, and I mentioned this in the Wexcast podcast that I do for Waterstones Exeter, which I'll link down below, where we talk about the books of the month, that it reminded me of something and I cannot remember what it reminded me of, and it's really annoying me. It reminded me of a writer's style and of something that I've read recently, and it's just really bugging me that I can't remember what. But I think it is really nicely written, and it is quite powerful. The depictions of, you know, plantation life are really striking. The one thing that I was not quite disappointed with, but perhaps didn't measure up to my expectations, was there wasn't as much of the Underground Railroad as I was expecting. When you consider that sort of the central conceit and the talk about this book was that, you know, it was making this, what was a metaphorical concept, into a physical thing. The Underground Railroad, there's these tunnels that the slaves have built for themselves, and it goes through all these different states, and, you know, some stations are closed down, and it didn't have as much of it. There were only like a few occasions where you're on the Underground Railroad, and it may sound sort of trivial, but yeah, I was just expecting a little bit more of the actual Underground Railroad. A little bit more talk of how it was built, who started it, how it came about, how it actually functions, and there's like little bits of it are sort of revealed as you go along, but you never actually spend as much time on the Underground Railroad as I was expecting. Maybe I got the wrong end of the stick, but that would be the one thing that when I was reading it, and it is quite slow. It does build sort of tension quite well, and with any kind of this story, I think if it was rushed in any way, it would have felt too far the other way, and it would have been wrong if it was rushed. But yeah, there were times where I sort of, you know, was reading it, and it does chug along. See what I did there? It does go along at a nice pace in the main, but there were occasions where I thought things just needed to sort of pick up a little bit quicker, and yeah, didn't spend quite as much time on the Underground Railroad as I was expecting. But having said that, it's a really solid read. So yeah, the ending certainly got the balance right between sort of what I was hoping for and what I was hoping wouldn't happen. In general, really solid read, but for me, a little bit more of the railroad would have been more interesting, as I say, because that's sort of what I was expecting. But yeah, so would definitely recommend this one. go and read Colson Whitehead. There has been a lot of talk about it, and I can certainly see why if it didn't quite measure up to what I was expecting. Then the last book that I read, and it really was the last book that I've probably read, and it was a little while ago, is Erin Kelly's He Said, She Said. I'll hold up the back cover because if I get it right in the light you can see that. Shiny! And this one I read on the last day of my sick leave, so before I went back to work, and the last day where I was sort of mostly pain-free and generally just wanting to get back to work and bored, and this one certainly got me through. So this one was recommended by Alice Slater at Smoking Tofu on Twitter, who you've heard me mention a lot, and thanks for the shout out to get me to 100 subscribers. Don't know what was with the face then. So she's a huge fan of Erin Kelly, particularly The Poison Tree and The Burning Air, which she talked about on Hello Friend podcast with Bethany Rutter, which I've spoken about before, but I will tag again down below. And yeah, she'd been recommending this one. Now, I remember seeing this one come out, and as I say, I was sent to proof, you know, a while ago, and I just felt in the mood for a thriller, something that I could just get my teeth stuck into, and I was like, you know what, I'm going to give Erin Kelly a go. Boy, am I glad I did. So this one is about Kit and Laura, who are eclipse chasers, and it transpires that essentially Laura and Kit witnessed a sexual assault during an eclipse, or just after an eclipse, at a festival, and because they were witnesses, they were involved in the trial, and then it's the sort of fallout from there. And it's one that, again, I'm not going to talk about too much because you have to read this totally spoiler-free. You have to read this with no concept of what is going to happen. But suffice to say, nothing will happen in this book the way you expect it will. Nothing. Nothing at all. You get about sort of like a third of the way in, and you think you know where it's going, and then, no, not a clue. And it's amazing for it. As I say, crime books, thrillers, not normally my kind of thing, but when I do read one, I want one that is believable, and again, without going too much into it, the sort of the courtroom scenes, yeah, they're accurate. I mean, I say believable and believable characters. With thrillers, I always want them to be, like, believable to a point, but you always know with a thriller that someone's going to do something. You're like, why didn't you just say... So you always know there's going to be a bit of that, but you want to believe a character all the way through before things are turned upside down. And yeah. Yeah. Boxes ticked everywhere. Dealing with really serious stuff. Really serious stuff. There's in this proof copy, and I'm not sure if it's in the finished one, there's a sort of Dear Reader by Erin Kelly where she talks about... she's always wanted to write about how the criminal justice system treats sort of sex crimes and rape cases, and was sort of trying to find a way in to how to write about that, and how to do it in a way that doesn't just use sexual assault as a kind of engine for a plot, and is something sort of, I guess in a way, trying not to use rape in the way that murder is used in a lot of sort of crime books nowadays, where it's just like, oh, look, somebody's died. To not downplay the seriousness. Yeah, it's just, for many, many reasons, I really love this book. I was really surprised when I went into it. As I say, I didn't know much about it. I only really knew the very little that Bethany and Alice talk about on Hello Friend podcast when they briefly mentioned this one. So I sort of went into it thinking, okay, because I've never read any Erin Kelly before, in a way I kind of set the bar quite high for her in my sort of reading taste, because it's like, right, well, if you screw up a book about sexual assault, I'm not going to read anything else. But as I say, I trust Bethany and Alice, especially after having read Exquisite. So I sort of went into it not knowing too much, hadn't had it spoiled for me at all, and yeah, this book, yes. For me, this isn't just your run-of-the-mill, female-written, female-led thriller. There's nothing run-of-the-mill about this at all. It's extraordinary. Nothing in it happens how you're thinking it's going to. Nothing at all. And I don't want to sort of overplay the kind of the serious aspects of it and the themes that it deals with, because as a book, as a thriller, it's so bloody good as well. Like, you just go and read this because it's got everything in this book. It's absolutely extraordinary, and I'm probably going to read another Erin Kelly very, very soon, much sooner than I was intending to, because of how fantastic this one is. So He Said, She Said by Erin Kelly. Go read now. Okay, so now for the few books that I have bought in the last part of July. So the first one that I picked up, I've actually just looked at it and thought it was probably a redundant purchase, actually, because I picked up Fatherhood by Karl Knausgård, which is another one of the Vintage Minis series. So you may remember I picked up before Toni Morrison's Race and Aldous Huxley's Psychedelics, and we had a few more of these come in the other day, so I picked up Fatherhood. Now, I've just realised looking at this, as I say, that this is, because all of the Vintage Minis are sort of like excerpts from authors' texts, this comes from A Man in Love, which is the second in the My Struggle series. And I've got that book on my shelf and I am going to read it at some point. So actually, this one might be a redundant purchase, because I'm going to read everything that's in it in the book. How to be a good father, children's birthday parties, unsuccessful family holidays, humiliating antenatal music classes, the trials of parenthood are all found in Knausgård's compelling and honest account of family life. Contrasting moments of enormous love and tenderness towards his children with the boring struggles of domesticity, this is one father's personal experience and somehow every father's too. So it's quite interesting. We've got a new bookseller who started at work, and she's actually doing her dissertation on, I've forgotten exactly what it was on, but it's something about the universality. Cultural universalism? I'm sorry, Meg, I can't remember exactly what it was. But essentially, one of the first conversations I had with her is because she had the first in Knausgård's My Struggle Saga in the staff room, which is A Death in the Family, and she's essentially writing an essay, her dissertation, not just an essay, you know, the big essay, on the concept that seems to have been much touted about Knausgård's work saying something to everybody, and actually whether it just says something to white middle class men, or whether there is any actually kind of universal aspect. Anyway, total side note, but yeah, that just somehow every father's too just sort of prompted that, because not every father is going to... Anyway, say as an addition to the vintage minis, I think it does sit in there quite well, and I am more than 80% likely to end up just collecting all of the vintage minis anyway, so in that sense it's probably not a redundant purchase. But yeah, jury's out on this one, because I am going to read at some point the whole text from which this is taken. Then I picked up a copy of a new poetry collection which is out this month, which is There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce by Morgan Parker, and this is a poetry collection that sort of deals with black femininity. The only thing more beautiful than Beyonce is God, and God is a black woman sipping rosé and drawing a lavender bath, texting her mum, belly laughing in the therapist office, feeling unloved, being on display, daring to survive. Morgan Parker stands at the intersections of vulnerability and performance, of desire and disgust, of tragedy and excellence. Unrelentingly feminist, tender, ruthless and sequined, these poems are an altar to the complexities of black womanhood in an age of non-indictments and déjà vu, and a time of wars over bodies and powers. These poems celebrate and mourn. They are a chorus chanting, "You're going to give us the love we need." So this one looks so good. I've sort of flicked through this one quite a few times, and already sort of my eyes have alighted upon some seriously impressive passages and punchy, powerful phrases, lines from the poem, so I'm really excited to give this one. I'm going to sit down at some point, and I keep saying I'm going to do these things and then I never actually get around to doing them, but I am definitely going to sit down and read this one alongside Keo Chingonyi's Kumakanda, because I think that would be quite an interesting sort of way of reading them. Black femininity, black masculinity. Morgan Parker is American, I believe, whereas Keo Chingonyi is British, so it's going to be interesting sort of seeing that difference as well. So yeah, I'm definitely going to sit and read those, and this one, yeah, I've heard a lot of talk about this one, so There Are More Beautiful Things Than Beyonce by Morgan Parker. Go check it out. And then I got myself a copy of a book that I've heard a lot of talk about and a lot of conflicting talk about, and that is More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. Now, I've heard a lot of people saying it's very sort of triggering, very brutal, and a lot of people saying that it's really, really incredible, as well as being all those things. So I'm going to give this one a go eventually, but this book is about 16-year-old Aaron Soto is struggling to find happiness after a family tragedy leaves him reeling. He's slowly remembering what happiness might feel like this summer with the support of his girlfriend Genevieve, but it's his new friend Thomas who really gets Aaron to open up about his past and confront his future. As Thomas and Aaron get closer, Aaron discovers things about himself that threaten to shatter his newfound contentment. A revolutionary memory alteration procedure, courtesy of the Lateo Institute, might be the way to straighten himself out, but what if it means forgetting who he truly is? So yeah, it's an LGBTQ novel, and it is meant to be quite hard-hitting. So if any of you have read this one, this is one that I would like to sort of know what you think before I read it, because as I say, I've heard a lot of sort of conflicting opinions about this one. A lot of different reviews, very sort of differing approaches. Yeah, it's an American author, and it's a sort of YA book. YA LGBTQ, but apparently it's not a particularly, there's not much Y of the YA. Apparently, I think it sort of is towards the more A end of YA. So yeah, More Happy Than Not by Adam Silvera. Do let me know if you've read this one, because I'm interested to hear a bit more about this one before I tuck in. And another one that I want to mention is a book that I cannot believe I didn't get when it came out, and that is Idiot Verse by Keaton Henson. Now, Keaton Henson is a musician and an artist and a poet who I am absolutely in love with. So he had a couple of albums called Dear and Birthdays that are sort of acoustic, just gorgeous, gorgeous albums. And then a couple of years ago, he released an album called Romantic Works, which is a sort of playing with classical music and found sounds, and it is the most gorgeous album that I have ever listened to. I went through a stage of sort of listening to nothing but that for a good couple of months, and just sort of crying but feeling joy and just so many emotions all in one go. And he's also got a collection of illustrations called Gloaming, which is absolutely gorgeous. It's about these sort of ghostly figures that are sort of kind of like a representation of depression, and it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous, gorgeous collection of illustrations. So I urge you to seek that one out. And Idiot Verse is his first collection of poems from acclaimed musician, writer and visual artist Keaton Henson. They were written in the late hours and early mornings of the past 3 years in hotel rooms, on park benches and in various apartments. They are stories of lost love, touring, reclusion and newfound renown, because the Romantic Works album kind of catapulted him a little bit more into sort of public life, I don't know, and he is sort of quite known for not particularly wanting to engage much with, you know, all of the sort of public side of being a musician and an artist. His music is absolutely incredible, whether it's Dear, Birthdays or Romantic Works. His illustrations are just absolutely gorgeous. I'm often just sort of on his website going, so yeah, Idiot Verse by Keaton Henson. I am gonna just gobble this up. I'm probably gonna sit and listen to Romantic Works, read this and have a good little cry. A good little cry. I'm gonna have a sob. It's gonna be a sob fest. A joyous sob festo. You know that feeling? The Germans have probably got a word for it. And then the last one from June is actually a book that is more a July book, and that is The Adversary by Emmanuel Carrère, and I've got a copy of this because it's the Waterstones non-fiction book of the month for next month. And I've started it, and I'm thinking it's going to be a grower more than a shower, in the sense that so far it's quite uncomfortable. So it's a book about Jean-Claude Romand, who in France in 1993 killed his wife and his child and then his parents and their dog because he was on the cusp of being found out for having 18 years lied to everybody about who he was and what he did. So this book is a sort of exploration of sort of why he did it and how he did it. And Emmanuel Carrère is in correspondence with Jean-Claude Romand in prison. I think the discomfort comes from, to be fair, Emmanuel Carrère has pretty much just started addressing it as to where I've got up to, in a scene where he is in the courtroom for Jean-Claude Romand's first court appearance, and he's sat only a couple of rows behind the mother of Jean-Claude Romand's wife, who he killed. And he is sort of sat there realising he could reach out and touch Florence's mother in her grief, but he is only there in the courtroom because of Jean-Claude Romand, and there's this moment where they sort of lock eyes and both look away. So that's where the discomfort is coming from, is that so far, and as I say, Emmanuel Carrère is sort of starting to touch on it, this sort of strange feeling of only being present in a courtroom and only having anything to do with the case and investigating it through Jean-Claude Romand, who has killed, you know, his whole family. But I am looking forward to, or not looking forward to, but intrigued to see the exploration of, you know, how and why he lied for 18 years about having been qualified as a doctor, and, you know, the only reason he has any money is because he sort of offers to invest money from his friends and his parents. The scale of that deception is staggering. So yeah, I thought I'd give it a go because it's not a very long book and it just seemed like a really interesting topic. So yeah, that's The Adversary by Emmanuel Carrère. So yes, those are the books that I have read in the last part of June and the last few that I've bought in the last part of June. So as a sort of wrap up and a haul in one there, to save doing like 5 different videos over the space of the next few weeks, because as I say, I've been so disorganised. And part of the reason I've been so disorganised is that there is a new Waterstone store opening in Torquay, and I've been sort of helping out with that. Now, I have not been half as involved as some other people, so I am nowhere near as tired or have been as busy as other people have. But basically, a couple of days this week while I finish work, I've popped to Torquay to sort of take some photos and stuff, and I will post links down below of the new Waterstones Torquay Twitter and Facebook pages so you can see a little bit of what we've been up to. And it has been so much fun going into a store. I mean, when I went in there on Thursday, it was empty. It was an empty shell. There were shelves and there were boxes of books, and there was so much to do. And then when I got there on Friday evening, the guys had worked so hard and it looked like a bookshop, and it looks amazing. So to see a bookshop go from empty to it's a bookshop is amazing. But yeah, so because I've had a couple of late nights and yeah, we've just been sort of quite busy at work, I'm quite tired and haven't been able to sort of organise myself with my videos. But new month, gonna get my head screwed on right. Then on my day off on Wednesday, I am going to record my books of the year so far video. I'm gonna record that on Wednesday morning, and that will go up hopefully Wednesday afternoon. And I think I know, so yeah, I think, yeah, that's what I've got prepared so far, and I sort of started thinking about what I'm gonna say, and I'm trying to decide whether I rank them or not, but anyway, that'll be Wednesday. And then from then I am, yeah, going to be a bit more organised. I know I've said this before, but I'm going to be more organised and have a bit more of a schedule. So that'll be fun. So yes, any thoughts on the books that I have read and any thoughts on the books that I have bought, although you know the drill with the ones that I've bought, the only one that I want to hear anything about is Adam Silvera's More Happy Than Not, because I'm intrigued by the splitting of opinion on that one. But yeah, if there's any thoughts on the ones that I have read, give a little comment down below, have a little chat with me. Are there any that you're gonna rush out and buy straight away, or are there any that you just think are absolute poop and think I was entirely wrong? Tell me, let's have a discussion. Was I wrong? Did I like a book I shouldn't have liked? Did I not like a book that I should have liked? So yeah, have a little chat in the comments below. Thank you again to the 100 of you who are subscribed. I think it's at like 102, 103 now, something like that. Exciting, yay, thank you. And yeah, I will be back on Wednesday with my books of the year so far. Unless I have such a panic filming it and get myself into such a tizzy that I just delete the whole thing and have a cry. No, that won't happen. Might happen. So yeah, thanks very much for watching, and you'll see me next time. Bye.